Well, I am glad I got away because I cannot believe this cold weather. It's making me crazy. So, yes, blessed and grateful that I got away to someplace warm for a few days. Had an amazing experience, and I wanted to share some of that today. And because I think it's going to be rather long, I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a video. If it's super long, I'm going to upload it to a YouTube channel because I've got all these ideas of ways that I want to connect with people. And so this has been on the back of my mind. And part of the reason came about because of the experiences I had on this trip. So anyway, I went on my first solo trip, and I will tell you, it was better than I could ever have imagined. It was so beyond awesome. And I was definitely nervous about doing it. The couple of days leading up to leaving, I was having a hard time sleeping because I was getting a little anxious. Traveling makes me a little bit anxious anyway, and the thought of doing it solo, going someplace that I had never been, and being by myself was giving me just a little bit of anxiety. But I'll tell you, I feel like when you are faced in life, at least this has been my experience, with something that maybe makes you a little anxious or you're a little afraid of doing, but inside you know you want to do it, when you can push past that fear and do it anyway, it can really lead to some amazing experiences. And that's exactly what happened for me this time. So what was really cool, I guess, in for me and how I could start talking to people was my book. So, I decided to take this trip, and my sister Jean recommended where to go. I wanted someplace safe where I could, walk pretty much everywhere. I didn't have to rent a car. That was easy to get to, where I could be beach and sand and pool. And so she suggested Lauderdale by the Sea, and I absolutely adored it. And I will definitely be going back. The hotel I stayed in was awesome, called the BVR, in case anybody wants to know, Beachside Village Resort. Right from the jump at the airport, it started. These connections started. So I was waiting for my flight in Boston, and a woman was sitting a couple seats beside me, older woman, and she just started chatting with me and asked if I was going away on vacation, and I said yes, and I explained to her my line where I kept meeting people was, I'm celebrating two big milestones, turning 60 a couple of weeks ago, and the publication of my very first book. So that was definitely a conversation starter. And inevitably, people congratulated me for both of the things and would ask me what my book was about. And so when I started to share a little bit and said, there's a good portion of poems and writings within it that deal with grief and loss, and that I've had a lot of loss in my life, and channeled it through my writing, channeled the pain and all that through my writing, it inevitably would spark open people's hearts, and they would begin to share their own experiences with loss and grief. And this is exactly what happened, as I said, right from the get-go at the airport. So this woman said that she was dealing with her own loss, and that she was actually returning back to Lauderdale, where she lives, but had been in Mass, to make arrangements for her husband's, who had passed, for his services and celebration of life, I guess, because they were both originally from Mass and had lived in Mass for a while before moving to Lauderdale. So anyway, she was struggling. She had been married for 40 years to the love of her life. She was a flight attendant, and he was a pilot, I think, for the Air Force. And so they had a adventurous life and traveled everywhere. and she had lost him 4 months prior. He had an illness that he had recovered from, and then it came back again. So she was lost. She was, I don't know, 72, 73, beautiful woman. But so I pulled out my book and I opened it to my Still Here poem, which I know many of you are familiar with. I've shared that a ton with people that have gone through loss. And she was touched, and she was touched. And she said she was definitely going to get my book. You know, we just chatted, and I was trying to encourage her that as hard as it was, what she was going through, that she was going to be all right. She was going to be all right. And, you know, I think she felt that hope by the time we finished our conversation. So that was awesome. So that was at the airport. And then, you know, I was thinking after meeting all these people, I wish I had a recording device. I wish I had been able to record the conversations, because everything's from memory. And so I'm just trying to recall bits and pieces. But anyway, that was the first experience. And then the second night, first night, I think I just chilled and stayed in and just caught up from my trip. And then the second night, I met up with my friend from pickleball, because she was in Fort Lauderdale, for a work conference. She was staying at the Ritz. So she invited me to pop over. She wasn't going to be able to spend much time with me because she was working, but I could say hi, see her where she was staying, and go from there. And so that's what I did. And boy, that place was beautiful. Beautiful. So I ended up sitting at the outside bar at the Ritz, getting myself a nice cocktail and meal. And sure enough, met some more people there. A young couple started talking to me. They couldn't have been more than, I would say, maybe 40, if that. The woman was stunningly beautiful. Her eyes were like crystal blue, gorgeous, very friendly, nice couple. So again, I talked about why I was there and mentioned my book. And then she opened up, the young woman, and said that she had lost her first husband unexpectedly, and that her mother-in-law, so the husband's mother, she wanted to buy my book specifically to give to her mother-in-law, because the mother-in-law had so much loss in her life. I think she said she lost her father like days before her wedding, and then she lost her son, and she lost her husband, and she was struggling. And so yes, we talked a bit, and they said they were going to buy my book. So maybe they did. I don't know. But that was interesting. So that was the second woman that had lost a husband. And then 3 minutes later, another couple come and sit on the right-hand side of me. And we started talking. And it ends up that, and she said she knew a lot. She said she knew a lot about loss. And she was hesitant, and I wasn't going to push. I didn't think she was going to open up, but she did end up opening up. She was, what did she say, 62 maybe? And she had lost her husband when he was maybe 54, 55, unexpectedly. She said he was healthy as can be, worked out, and then he dropped dead of a heart attack and left her with, her 3 kids, and her world was shattered, she said. But the beautiful story that came out of that was about a year or 2 after her husband passed. She said she was at some jazz festival where she lived in Rochester, New York. And she ended up bumping into this man who she had dated when she was in her 20s. And they started chatting. And next thing you know, they went on a date. And that's who she was with. They ended up together and both very happy. And I thought that was a beautiful story. Loved hearing that. Hope after after losing the love of your life like that. So that was three women, boom, 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 right in a row that had lost husbands. And that I was able to give some, to lend an ear to listen, and, you know, share a little bit about my losses. And again, they were very eager to know more about my book and took screenshots of the book so they could then order it later. I don't know, maybe they did. I've seen a few sales. I think I've sold 4 or 5 books while on my trip. So anyway, just meeting these people and hearing their stories, really amazing. And I was so blessed to be able to be there for it. And, you know, if I hadn't been by myself, I don't think I would have gotten these really intimate exchanges with these strangers. So it was pretty cool. And then, okay, so then the next night was a blast. I went to, and what was great about where I was, you could, as I said, you could walk everywhere. So like a 10-minute walk and you were down where the, you know, the restaurants and little shopping area was. And so I went to the Aruba Beach Cafe upon a friend's recommendation for happy hour. And when I got there, the place was jammed. Guy playing guitar, people were just laughing and having a ball, and no seats to be had at the bar. There was a couple bars, so I just roamed around and ordered a beer and thought I'll just have a beer and, you know, stay for a few and then I'll go get dinner somewhere else. Well, when I looked around, I saw this group and they all had t-shirts that were a 60th birthday t-shirts. So that was my in right there. So I said, I'm going to go talk to them. And I did. I went over. I said, hey, I just had my birthday. I'm celebrating. I'm down here celebrating my 60th. And I welcomed them to the club. And lo and behold, they were from Massachusetts, from the North Shore, Salisbury, I believe. Fun bunch of people. So they were totally friendly, invited me to hang out with them when they knew I was solo, and had a blast. Danced my ass off. And you guys that know me know that's my favorite thing to do. Live music and dancing, so that was a blast. And prior to that part of the evening when we were dancing and all that, I knew I had to get something to eat. And so I did find a seat and ordered a meal, and lo and behold, there was a man sitting next to me. Well, he was actually standing there. He was standing up. He had his chair. He was like leaning on his chair, and then when he ordered a meal, he ended up sitting down. So we just started chatting a little bit, and again had my introduction and started talking about my book, and lo and behold, he tells me his story. He was from Maine, and he spends part of his time down there. But he said that he had been, well, what he did, he said, I'll show you. So he proceeds to take off his baseball cap, and he has this huge scar on his head. And he proceeds to tell me that he had been, I don't know how many years prior, maybe 5 years prior. Again, this is all from memory here, so I may not be exact. But anyway, he had been in a motorcycle accident and basically almost died. And he told me he had what he remembered experiencing, which is what very much sounds like it was a near-death experience, is that he said he remembers just feeling so peaceful, and just he couldn't even really describe the love and the peace that he felt, and that he saw a face. Somebody came to him. He said he thinks it was his mother, and they basically told him that he couldn't stay, that he had to go back, that it wasn't his time. And I was like, whoa, because this kind of stuff is right up my alley, near-death experiences. I love watching like YouTube videos detailing people that have had them, and it's fascinating. And they all talk about just that feeling of peace and love that's overwhelming. And that's what he was talking about. He said that he didn't want to go back. He didn't want to come back here. And he said he struggled with it after. And he struggled trying to figure out, like, why did God send me back? And you hear about that when you hear people telling of these stories that they struggle when they return and question why God spared them. And so, but he had 2 sons. He was divorced, I believe. And so what ended up happening, so he had a long recovery. He said he was in a coma for 10 days. He had to be in, intensive rehab, and basically, a long road, but he did what he had to do. And, despite like having trauma and some PTSD from the accident, and also he said he was in the military, so he had served overseas and had some PTSD from that. But anyway, he was able to get back to walking and back to healing his body. So he was very grateful. And so about a year after that, I think he said it was a year, he said his son, so he had 2 sons, and I don't know, a son that this happened to might have been like late teens or 20. I guess he jumped off the back of a boat and ended up almost, it was like, they thought he was going to be paralyzed, basically. So he said, when he got that call, he rushed to the hospital, and he said he was praying to God. And so after, his son did come out of it and didn't end up being paralyzed. I don't know if he had to have surgery or what, I can't remember, but he said he remembers the neurosurgeon coming out, and he went to thank him, for saving his son's life. And it ended up being the same neurosurgeon, I guess, that he had when he had his motorcycle accident, which he thought was crazy. And so when he went to thank him, the neurosurgeon said something like, "Don't thank me, I didn't save him, somebody else did." So it was, and so then he knew, he said he had to help his son through the rehab process. And because he had already been through it himself, he was really able to, he knew what was ahead for his son in the terms of recovery, and could walk him through the process and be his source of strength through the process. And so we both agreed that was why he had to come back. He had to come back to be there for what was eventually going to happen to his son. And thanks be to God, his son didn't end up being paralyzed and is doing okay. So that was a pretty amazing story. And then, as I said, after that, I danced my butt off and had a ball and laughed and had so much fun. Okay, then, I know this is getting long, but bear with me because I want to keep going here while it's in my mind. So then the next night, was that the next night? Oh, no, was it that night? I came home, and there were 2 sisters staying in the room beside me, and we had little balconies overlooking the pool. So when you went out on your balcony, if your neighbors were out, you could converse with them if you wanted to. So I had met them, nice ladies, and from Connecticut, I think they said, I forget. But anyway, I started telling them about, oh no, this was the night before. So this was the same night that I had gone to the Ritz and met those 2 different couples. I was telling them about that and how I met the couples, and told them about the book. And so one of the women, Maureen, started saying that, she was dealing with loss too. And so she ends up telling me that she had lost her dog, her 14-year-old dog, and she was crushed. And so I said, oh, let me get my book. I'm gonna share with you a piece I wrote about my dog. So I did that. I went and got my book, brought it over, and she read that piece, My Dog, My Teacher, and it brought her to tears. She was very moved by it. And then she opened up and started sharing about her dog and showing me pictures, and we talked about how much love our dogs had brought to our lives. And so that was pretty cool too. And we exchanged info, and we'll definitely keep in touch. She texted her son like right away and asked him if he could get on Amazon and order the book. So it was going to be there for her when she returned from her vacation. And so then let's see, now getting back to, it's Saturday night? Yeah, Saturday night. So I went Wednesday, came back Monday morning. Saturday night, I went, again, I took a walk down to the local area where the restaurants were, and sat at the bar at this restaurant, out, facing the outside area, beach right across the way. And I sat next to this woman, and I could just feel her energy, that she was just not a typical happy vacationer there on vacation and just having a ball. She was subdued and she was quiet. And so I think I asked her, yeah, I did. I initiated a conversation first and just said, oh, are you here on vacation? And she said, no. She said she was there. She had just flown in from LA and was leaving back to go back to LA the following day. And her purpose for being there was bringing her son to drop him off at a 3-month rehab. Her son, whose 20th birthday was the next day. Her son, who had struggled with addiction and been in and out of rehabs, she said, for several years. And this was her last ditch effort. She was going to be spending $85,000 for a 3-month rehab. And she said, I can't imagine having to go through that with your child. And sadly, so many people do. She basically said that she had told him she had to kick him out of her house. And she told him that he had a year to get sober. And if he wasn't sober after a year, she was going to have to walk away, because it just brought so much devastation into her life. And she just tried everything, to get him well. But so I felt her pain. She told me, and I had never heard about this, this synthetic version of an opioid that's like 10 times stronger than morphine, that I'm trying to think of the name of it now. But she said it's basically marketed like candy, and it's put in like energy drinks, sold at like 7-Eleven, places like that. And she said there was a whole piece on 60 Minutes about it. I want to say, I keep saying Kratom, but I know that's not the name. Kratom or something like that. But anyway, that's what was his downfall. And I'm like, what? I had never heard of this thing. Like, what on earth? How is that even allowed to be sold and put into energy drinks and marketed like candy, basically? It's horrible, horrible. But anyway, what else? So she told me, I told her, the birthday thing, that I just had a birthday. And she said, I just turned 62. And I said, oh yeah, when was your birthday? She says, April 4th. So that was April 5th. So that was the day after mine, which was April 4th. She told me her name. She said her name was Chloe. And I said, oh my gosh, that's my baby's name. And she said, well, do you know what that name means? And I said, no. And she said, her parents had named her that after a Greek play. And the name Chloe means Princess of the Green Grass. And I thought, that's really beautiful. I couldn't wait. I had to write that down so I could share with my Chloe. So then she shared that she was a screenwriter. She started telling me about her life. It sounded pretty wild and amazing. And her parents were famous screenwriters. Her father was an actor. She told me the movie that they wrote. And I would say it, but I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to break her, even though she'll never see this probably. I don't want to give that away. I don't want to give her identity away. But anyway, parents are both screenwriters and big art collectors too. And so, but we talked about everything from, about our childhood, religion. I mean, how I was brought up with religion, she was not. She said her father's parents were Orthodox Jew. Her mother was Lutheran. And the father's parents, upon finding out he was going to marry this Lutheran woman, disowned him, basically. So we talked about religion and we talked about faith and God and signs, and I don't know. I just wanted to encourage her and just give her hope that her son was going to be okay. And I think she just needed that, She was lovely. She was lovely. And we actually ended up in tears at different points because it was just a very profound connection. And it was meant to be. And I said that. I said this was divinely guided. I felt like God guided me on my trip to all these people I met. She felt like it was a divinely guided experience. And she shed some tears and told me that she needed hope, and that I gave her hope in that moment when she was there by herself dealing with the horrible thing that she was dealing with. So I and then that made me cry because I just felt so blessed. I felt so blessed by that. And then, so we talked some more, and she was saying to me, and then I started to say, because when I knew she was a screenwriter, I said, oh my God, my friend just wrote a book about his experience as an FBI the head of the FBI task force that brought in this Boston mob boss, Whitey Bulger. And I started talking about that, and she just shut me right down. And she's like, we're talking about you and your book, and I want you to focus on how you're going to promote your book. And I went, okay. She's like, what are you doing to promote your book? And I said, I don't know. I'm kind of just word of mouth. And, I said, I wrote the book mainly as a, for my own soul reasons, and also as like a legacy to my kids, my girls, and my family. And which is the truth. I said, the icing on the cherry on the top, or the icing on the cake is other people buying it and getting it out there. But she's like, yeah, no, you need to promote your book. And I said, how do you, I said, you haven't even read my book. And you're already telling me you're convinced I need to promote it. She's like, I can tell. I know you have a message there. So I was touched by that. That really moved me. And I promised her that I would do some more things to promote my book. And I made her promise me, because she said she spent like the past 7 years, hasn't done anything for herself. She'd spent some time on the beach that day, but that was the only time that she had really like taken time for herself. And I asked her, what does she do? What do you do for yourself? What do you do to take care of yourself? She's like, I don't know. I really don't. And so we talked about yoga and pickleball, and she used to do yoga years ago, but it hurt her back and hadn't been back in a while. But anyway, I made her promise that I told her about one of my favorite forms of yoga, which is Kundalini yoga. And she said she actually had a friend who was a big Kundalini yoga instructor. And so I said, all right, well, you got to try that. And she also said she had friends that played pickleball. And I said, okay, well, you need to try that. So she promised me she was going to do these little things for herself. And I promised her that I was going to make more of an effort to promote my book and find some creative ways to do that, which I have thought of since then. And I'll share that later. But anyway, so it was a beautiful, beautiful interaction, connection. And then I went to get up to go use the ladies' room. And of course, the person singing starts singing Country Roads, which made me lose it because that is my Jimmy song. And that was a sure sign that he was there in the mix. And he shows up for me through that song. I could be anywhere and that song comes on. And in fact, it happened again the next night with another woman I met. But I'm not going to get into that because this is getting way too long. But anyway, it was a beautiful trip. And I'm so grateful that I met these people that I met through my book. And yeah, I can't wait to see where else this book brings me. I can't wait to see what other people, you know, and what stories I hear through the process. All right, anyway, that's it. And again, if you want to do something, but you're stopping yourself because of fear and not knowing whether you can do it and whether you have the courage or whatever, I'm telling you, if you can push through that fear, get to the other side, as I said, you may find yourself experiencing something even better than what you thought possible. All right. God bless you guys. And I will keep filling you in as these stories come along. Sending you so much love. Take care.